Well, I am currently most thankful to Kent for opening up with a joke because I am not funny, and it's a lot harder to look at a room full of people as opposed to a little black box and talk when I can actually see your reactions to the things I say. I'm not going to attempt to make any jokes because you guys wouldn't laugh, but thank you so much for that introduction, Stephanie and Stephen, you as well, and Dave, for your great blessing. I really do appreciate it. You know, I'm really used to talking in 2-minute increments on television, maybe 3 minutes if the CNN panel before me doesn't go long. So we'll see how a whole 30 minutes here goes. Hopefully we can take some questions at the end of this. You know, when I left ESPN for CNN, my grandmother said, "Oh, well, I really hope that this new job brings you to Baton Rouge as much as the old one did." And I said, well, "Gran, you don't want CNN sending me to Baton Rouge." Nothing good would be coming of that. So I really want to thank my Aunt Mary Evans and Daryl for extending this invitation to me to come speak with you all today. A great excuse to come home, not on CNN's behalf. It's so nice to see this familiar table full of faces in front of me from Episcopal. I really appreciate you all being here as well, and all of you for taking time out of your day. I don't take that for granted, so thanks to you all for being here. I'm often asked how I manage my nerves when I'm on television. Like I said, this to me, way more nerve-wracking than talking to a couple million people on TV. But whether I'm talking about a football game with 100,000 people in the stands behind me or in the middle of a hurricane, like hoping that I don't get blown away, I always think about how would I tell this story to my grandmother? Because I do know that she's always watching, as is my mom. So to be able to talk to you all today and actually have you guys right here in front of me makes it all the more easier. So thank you guys for being here too. A couple of years ago, I got some really great advice from the executive producer of College Game Day at ESPN. This was in preparation for the very first college football playoff, and I was assigned to cover the University of Alabama, and it was a huge assignment for me, and I was very nervous about it. And he told me very simply, give me anecdotes, tell me stories. Don't give me stats, don't give me numbers. You're not an analyst, don't try to be one. Ask yourself before every report, how unique is this content? Would I be interested in it, and what am I learning? So that's sort of going to be my guide for talking to you all today, just to tell you some stories about my professional life. It's kind of crazy. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around it when I hear Stephanie bullet point the stops along the way. I'm 32 years old, and it's baffling to me that I've been as fortunate as I have to work for the different networks that I have and to have had a front row seat to as many events as I have had. When you hear Stephanie give that introduction and you hear, college football playoff and NCAA basketball tournament and College World Series, you're like, why would you leave that? Like, that sounds like so much fun, especially for a room full of what I can only assume are sports fans here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. But I'm asked that question a whole lot. And why would I leave ESPN and a job that sounds just like so much fun for CNN, especially in the climate that we live in right now? And the fact is, the answer for me is really simple, and the decision wasn't hard when CNN came to me with this offer. I saw the move to CNN as a tremendous opportunity for growth for me as a person, as a reporter, and as a storyteller. And also, at the end of the day, it was just a new challenge. And I think for all of us, it's always good to be challenging yourself in new ways, to take yourself out of your comfort zone and to do something that's uncomfortable. Maybe this works out, maybe it doesn't, maybe I go back to sports, maybe this is my official transition into news and away from sports. But as I think of the bigger picture of my career, I don't want to be pigeonholed into one or the other. I just want to be a storyteller. And I want to be someone who makes other people comfortable to share their stories in whatever world they may be living in. One of the things I didn't anticipate about the switch, though, coming from all of the fun of college sports, was the mental and emotional fortitude that would be necessary to do this job. I have showed up entirely too many times in the last 9 months of this job on the worst day of somebody's life. There was the Wright family in Lyons, Georgia, who I met as they were receiving the body of their son who had been killed in Niger, one of the 4 Green Berets who lost their life in an ambush there. Or there was the couple whose dream home I stood in with the back ripped off in Ponte Vedra Beach after Hurricane Irma. Or there was the entire community of Charlottesville that I stood in the middle of as they watched white supremacists rally in their otherwise cute and sleepy college town. And Charlottesville really was my welcome to the NFL moment, if you will. And in truth, I felt like my background reporting in sports was the best training for that day, because there was nothing I could have done or anybody else could have done to prepare for that day, because it really was, in my mind, like reporting on a sporting event in hell. I mean, it was so much of that day and so much of my reporting was purely based off what do I see and what do I hear and how are people reacting to this, just real observations. And it's interesting, if you were to go back and watch that footage of the day, I don't know if you didn't see my face on camera until about 6 p.m. because if we had any idea what that day was going to turn into, and we had nobody knew what that day was going to turn into. CNN would have sent a lot more people than just me, that's for sure. But I had gone down to do a setup piece to be aired before the rally. So I did a couple of interviews, spoke with local business owners, and spoke with the mayor and the police chief, and all of the things you would do to try to tell the story of why are these people coming to this town? Is it really about a Confederate monument? What else is it about? I went to the home of the man who organized the Unite the Right rally and spoke with him and shook his hand, and then the very next day was seeing him as a completely different person in his role in that day. But so all of that to say, we're there with one camera and one producer and one reporter, and all hell breaks loose. And we immediately had to make the decision, okay, Kaylee, we're not going to show your face on television anymore because our camera can't leave the action. This is the only way CNN's going to see what's happening here. And so I was literally calling in from my cell phone to report on what was happening as it was happening. I was staying on the line. The control room would just say, we're coming back to you. What do you see? And it was literally trial by fire for me in that moment. And when I think back on that day, there was so much about it that you can't process in the moment. Because like I said, you're just, what did I see? What did I hear? And the fact of the matter was that day I saw a lot of violence. And I was right in the middle of it with the safety of 2 security guards. I felt safe. 2 big security guards who were well armed for the day. But so much of the challenge of this job is processing the bigger picture while you're still right in the middle of it, and that day we had rushed over after the rally had ended to the scene of the vehicular assault that took the life of Heather Heyer. And then President Trump made his remarks that there was violence on both sides. And I think now there has been plenty of talk in reaction to that statement. But in that very moment, they came to me and the anchor asked, well, Kaylee, what's your reaction to that? And I said very honestly, there was violence on both sides. Because I was in the middle of it and I saw it and that's what it felt like. But what was inaccurate about that statement, I realized after the fact, was that there weren't just 2 sides. The day, the picture, the people, it was so much bigger than that. It wasn't as simple as putting people in a good bucket or a bad bucket. It wasn't a sporting event. People weren't wearing jerseys with their team name across their chest. My biggest mistake of that day was that I couldn't identify each person and their affiliation and what role they were playing in that day, because there were plenty of nonviolent protesters like Heather Heyer, people from that community who were there standing up to evil. But there were a lot of other players there as well that day that contributed to the mayhem that I saw ensue, where it didn't matter what color you were getting pepper sprayed in the face with homemade agents that made of who knows what. Or you were using a flagpole as a weapon because that was the way to fight or protect yourself. But that day, I can't imagine what the next day will be like for me. That becomes such a learning experience. But that's what this job is about, and processing things on the fly and figuring out how to share with anybody who's watching, what I've just witnessed firsthand. Another big day for me at CNN, in a very different end of the of the spectrum, I was in studio preparing to do a quick report on an assault on Senator Rand Paul in his yard by his neighbor while he was cutting his grass. And we got the first alert that there was a shooting at a church in Sutherland Springs, Texas. And when you're in the newsroom at CNN, that was a Sunday. When you're in the newsroom at CNN on a Sunday versus a Monday, it's a very different scene. There are just not as many bodies to make phone calls. There's not as much hustle and bustle. It was, I think, 5 of us who just started picking up the phone. And while one person is calling the police department and another person's calling hospitals, I just pulled up Google Maps. I'm like, okay, where is this church? What is near it? Not a lot. There was a gas station. Called the gas station. A woman answered the phone. I said, "Hi, ma'am. Have you heard about the shooting at the church across the street?" She goes, "Oh, yeah, we heard all the shots." And she told me everything about what she heard that day and what she saw. And for the next, 8 hours that I was on television, I had an eyewitness report that I could share. And that was our window, one of our windows into what had transpired that day. But I learned a lesson in how CNN works that day, in the sense that my job that day was to sit on the set in Atlanta with the anchor and share information as it was coming in, while other reporters got put on airplanes to go down to Texas. And I was mad. I was so frustrated. I was like, I'm right here. Why don't they send me? I want to get in the action. They're like, your job today is to report the news as it's happening. And if you're on a plane, who's doing that? So, anytime any of us take a new job, there are those just institutional experiences to understand better how a place operates. One of the things that is also different about CNN and my schedule these days, I think when Mary first reached out to me about coming here, I had just started at CNN, and I just didn't know when I would be allowed to take a day and come down here. It's at ESPN, it was very clear, you have football season and then basketball season, then you get spring football and then a month off, and then the College World Series and then another month off, and then it starts all over again. You can't take a Saturday off in the middle of college football season. But at CNN, it's a shockingly more corporate culture that I'm very thankful for, in the sense that they say you have X number of vacation days and you need to put those in this system and we will approve them, and then you're gone. Like, you are off and you are off the clock and we will not call you. So they say. But they say, and I've had people have had to really hit me over the head with this, because I'm still of the age of just, I'm not married, I don't have kids, I want to work, I want to stay busy, I want to be where they'll let me be, and I want to be involved in the big stories. But they say there will always be another story. So live your life, take your time where you can get it, and know that when you come back, there will be another story, despite whatever you missed. That being said, speaking of taking my schedule and sports for granted, at CNN, when you are on the clock, you have to be ready to go at all times. I keep a suitcase in my car called my go bag. And you can literally be told, whether you're at lunch or, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're dead asleep, or if you're just sitting in the office, it's like, go, you need to go right now. And actually, Steve and I were just talking about yesterday, the school shooting in Kentucky. We got our first alert at CNN around 9:20 that there was a situation. CNN confirmed it within the next 10 minutes. And then within 2 hours, one of our correspondents and producers were on a plane from Atlanta to fly to Nashville and then drive to Kentucky. And then he was on television, I believe, within 3 hours after that. But a perfect example of get your go bag and literally go right now. I think to transition to the turns in my career, it's hard turns to make. I don't know really how you make those smooth transitions when you're discussing it in a forum like this. But for the home crowd, all you LSU fans, to get back to the days at ESPN, I get asked the question a lot. Maybe not so much anymore, but definitely while I was there, if I even liked sports. And I found that so offensive. That job? Oh, I see what you're saying about the cracks in the stage. Not safe for high heels. Yeah. But I would get asked that question all the time. I'm like, that job would have been miserable if I wasn't a sports fan. It is not glamorous, despite what reputation some of those jobs may have. But I came at that job so much as a fan first. Maybe the first athlete I was ever a fan of, Jimmy Williams, sitting right there. Best athlete maybe ever to come out of Episcopal. But I came into that job at ESPN thinking of it as being a fan first. And that dedication to the job was really tested in my very first game at ESPN. It was the fall of 2012, and mind you, I had just come from 5 years of working at CBS News alongside Bob Schieffer, the most incredible human and political reporter. But it was election night, November 2012. I am given my first football game on ESPN. You asked election night's a Tuesday. Why are you working a Tuesday game? Yeah, it was a Maction game, as we call them. It was Toledo and Ball State. What? I can say that in this crowd. I don't think anybody's gonna be offended. But so I go off to Toledo in November. I pack the warmest coat that I have, which was bought on the campaign trail with Bob in 2008 in New Hampshire, when I'd never seen so much snow in my life. But I pack that coat, and then I get there, and I'm like, it is really cold. I am so not prepared for this. So I go to Dick's Sporting Goods, and I start saying, okay, I need to layer up, and I need gloves, and I need a hat. I definitely need a hat. It's gonna be so cold. Well, I'm in there by myself. And so I text my mom. I'm like, I'm shopping, I gotta figure out what I'm gonna wear, but I'm at Dick's Sporting Goods. I look at this hat, what do you think of this hat? And it's this white knit hat. I really wish that this could just be a slideshow. And she immediately replies, "You'd rather be cold." That is what moms are for, and you are so right. You are so right. Anyway, Ball State upset Toledo. I'm sure you guys were really hanging on the edge of your chairs for that one. But when it comes to the picture of my career at ESPN, my first big day in this world of social media that we live in was my first viral video, if you will. Thank you, Les Miles. It was the fall of 2013, and I had gotten a call. At this time, I was working primarily for Longhorn Network, hosting a studio show in Austin, but would occasionally have ESPN events sprinkled in there, like the Toledo Ball State game. And so I get this call that says, can you go to Baton Rouge to do an Inside the Program for SportsCenter tomorrow? And I'm like, can I? How fast can I get to the airport? I will be there, right? I'm calling my mom in the car. I don't need a hotel, guys. I'm so cheap. This is great. Got a place to stay. Let's go right now. So I'm out the door, and I get a call from this producer, this SportsCenter producer, who I'd never worked with before. I'd never been on SportsCenter before, I don't think, other than, a post-game interview of mine being put on there. And he's like, okay, so we're doing this day Inside the Program, and it's going to start. You're going to ride to work with Les Miles. And I'm like, my parents live 2 doors down from him, so I'll just meet you there. Wait. He's like, do I need to pick you up? I'm like, no, we're good. So the next morning I wake up, walk out the door, and knock on the Miles door, and he's finishing breakfast, and we get in the car, and our audio guy climbs in the trunk of his Escalade, and we just have a GoPro mounted on the front windshield. And so obviously, I know where I'm going. I'm thinking, okay, we're going from Bocage Lake to the football ops offices. I mean, there's 3 ways you could go, but I bet he's not going to go straight through campus. Anyway, I'm kind of thinking this through in my head, which way are we going to go? And so I asked him, and he said, oh, I'll show you something you've never seen before. I go, great. So we go, and we get on that big curve at college and corporate, and the car starts beeping. And I'm all I'm thinking is, oh my gosh, the audio quality, what is happening? Because I'm just interviewing him as we're rolling. And he doesn't have a seatbelt on. So then he's trying to put on his seatbelt, and we're going around the curve, and you're just oh my gosh, what am I gonna make it through this? And then we pass Acadian, okay, one route, not an option. And then we pass Dalrymple, and I'm like, where are we going? And then we get off at what's that street called, the next Louise. We get off at Louise. I'd never gotten off on that exit before. And so I kind of look at him, he's like, oh yeah, this is the back way. So we get off, and there's a stop sign, and then we stop there, and then there's a red light, and it's red. And he just kind of treats it like a stop sign and just rolls right through. And I have this moment of this is such good TV. Oh my gosh. How do I call him out and say, so I just did it. I'm like, you just ran a red light, with me in the car and cameras in the car. He's like, oh, no. I anticipated the change. I had no clue. I mean, I knew that it was good TV, but I don't think I knew how good it was. That thing went viral so fast to the point where in the press conference the next day, they made him diagram the intersection as he explained. Oh man, God bless that man. That interview with Les was taped, and the whole 15-minute car ride probably could have entertained this whole room of people for sure. But there's something to be said for the magic of a live interview. And I think when people think of sports and sideline reporters, you think immediately of the post-game interview or the halftime interviews. There is no coach of any sport ever who wants to talk to a reporter at halftime. Like there's just like no chance. So you do what you can. Sometimes I wish with Coach O. I mean, I worked 4 LSU games in the 2016 season. Sometimes I just wanted to be like, Coach, and then be able to fill in for him. Got to play for 60 minutes, 1 team, 1 heartbeat. Like go. Like that could have been it. Like that's really all he says in every halftime interview ever. Love the man, but God bless him, none of them ever want to talk to us. So you do what you can to try to get something out of them. But at the end of the day, 90% of those guys are going to tell you it doesn't matter what you ask. For as much thought as I would put into how am I going to ask this question and how do I ask it in a way that's not just what adjustments are you going to make at halftime. Doesn't really matter. They're going to tell you whatever they want to tell you. I think that the love I have for sports is real, and I miss that job every day, and it was so much fun. But at the same time, I'm really proud of myself for taking on this new challenge and for stepping outside of my comfort zone and seeing what I'm made of and seeing what kind of strength I have in incredibly difficult situations. But there's so much now about my job that I take great gratification in and a lot of pride in when people are willing to share their stories with me and when I'm able to give a firsthand account of what I see and hear when you guys can't be there. But at the end of the day, it's so hard for me in the news world to rival the experiences I had for 5 years at CBS News along Bob Schieffer. I was his personal assistant in a way that is very unglamorous, all of the duties that any personal assistant would take on, but just to be by his side. It was better than any history class. It was like my master's, that I got paid about minimum wage to get. But he gave me so much perspective in an industry and in a world that continues to change. But for me, the moment I'm proudest of with him was this 2008 presidential debate that he moderated. He moderated 04, 08, and 12. But in 08, I was his researcher. And to hear Bob say, a man who's interviewed every president since Nixon, to hear him say, that he would get butterflies before walking on that stage, reminds me that it's okay. I should get nervous. That's human. And it also reminds you of the weight of this job. I think the only thing I missed in that debate, I really would have earned my pay had I known about the role Joe the plumber would have played in that debate, if you remember it. It was, didn't see that coming. But now that I am at CNN, it's such an interesting time to be there. People say, oh, the ratings have never been better and whatnot, and that's true, but right now, if you're not a reporter in Washington, it can be really hard to cut through. Right now, for example, like today, we have a reporter in Michigan for the sentencing of Larry Nasser, who I believe just got sentenced to 125 or 135 years for his abuse of those gymnasts. We have one reporter in California for a hearing for the Turpin family, that there's a house of horrors where they were holding their 13 children captive. And then we have the one reporter I spoke of earlier who is in Kentucky for the school shooting. But other than that, everything on CNN's air today is politics. That's the climate. That's what, for better or worse, that's what people are tuning to CNN to see, or maybe turning off CNN to see. But my one favor I would ask of all of you in leaving here is watch CNN like you watch ESPN, in the sense that think of the roles everyone's there to play. I was not at ESPN to be a college football or a college basketball analyst. I didn't play the game. In football, it was so much fun to listen to Kirk Herbstreit or Jesse Palmer and Tim Tebow, Marcus Spears, break down the game in their way. But I was there to be the eyes and ears on the field, to tell you about the injuries to the players, to tell you about a conversation I had with a coach, to report the news that I gathered from those games or events. The same is true at CNN. In this climate where rhetoric against journalists and journalism is just like hostile, when fake news is being used. The president tweeted, what was it? Calling, Americans, he calls journalists the enemy of the people. He calls fake news the enemy of the people. And I think that we have to separate the roles that people play on CNN, just like we do when watching ESPN. So think about the analysts on CNN. Those guys, the former campaign strategists or spokespeople, they are there to analyze and to share their spin and to give you their perspective. But the reporters, the journalists, the people who are trained in this profession are there to give you the news in the most objective and unbiased way that they possibly can. That's my goal every time I'm on television, is to tell you what I see and what I hear, and for it to be the facts. Whatever the analysts say is on them, but just think about the way you watch any network, whether that's CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, and remember that not everybody's there to fulfill the same role, and that there are so many journalists in this country doing incredible work and putting their lives on the line and their reputations on the line and trying so hard to get it right, that to challenge that very tenet of journalism is it's hurtful to anybody who's put so much effort into it. So that's my favorite ask of all of you guys, is just to differentiate between who it is that's speaking when you watch TV and make a judgment about their credibility and their perspective. So anybody got any questions? Yeah. Oh, you got a joke? Oh, man.
First of all, you lied. You're very funny.
Thanks.
I'm curious, what would all your teachers and friends at Episcopal say about you when you were in high school? And then you can ask them when you get done.
Oh, okay. What? Oh.
I've read the file. It's a perfect file. In all ways, and no disciplinary whatsoever. Next question.
I will say, I can't say this. I think that anybody who knows me has known me that long, and there are plenty of people. Jon Snow, I see you back there. Rick Bond, where are you? Elise Walker, where are you? There are plenty of people who could speak. If you'd like to, I'm not going to stop you, but I'm going to save you from that. But I think the funny thing about me is that I knew from a very young age what I wanted to do, and I feel lucky for that. And the fact of the matter is, this gets personal fast, but, as I'm sure many of you know, my father was a pilot and died in a plane crash in Lafayette when I was 10 years old. And I came home that day on the absolute worst day of my life. And the television was on CNN. And they talked about his crash. But they talked about his plane crash like it was an event. There was no mention of the most wonderful man I've ever known. There was no mention of the person or the people he left behind. It was just simply an event. And I remember thinking that day, I want to do better. I want to humanize stories like this for the people that they affect. And so for me, now, when I show up on the worst day of somebody's life, I take incredible pride in knowing each person's name, in getting to know the character of the person whose life was lost, if that's the case. But I say all of that to say that I feel very lucky that, I know I wrote an essay for Miss Milligan's 7th grade English class, talking about how I wanted to be the host of the Today Show one day. Maybe that could still happen. I don't know. But I do feel lucky that I've known for a long time, as long as so many of these people have known me, what I wanted to do, and now I'm getting to do it, and it's a pretty cool feeling.
I want to know more about that.
About what? The hat.
White knit hat.
Oh, the white knit hat. Oh gosh, I actually have a photo of it. It was just a white knit, like very simple cap that I just thought, this will keep me warm. This will keep my ears warm. Thank you, Mom, for shutting that down real fast. Appreciate it.